Hello everybody and welcome to the making of the Edith Cushing nightgown from Crimson Peak. I wore this to MCM October in London in 2021. It's sort of a documentary style making of video rather than a tutorial, but there are a few tips and tricks here and there. I will put a disclaimer and say that I got dental surgery throughout the process of making this video, so here and there my voice and my speech is a little bit slurred, but I hope it's still enjoyable nonetheless. And without further ado, I hope you all enjoy the video. Can we just appreciate how much this planner fits the theme of this costume? So I have just now decided that I will document this Edith costume on my Instagram as well as making a sort of YouTube video of it. So to start, I have this commercial pattern. Usually I make my own patterns for my costumes and whatnot, but I actually bought this a couple of years ago. I have to say it's probably not going to be, really historically accurate. I mean, not that my costume will be, but I know that commercial patterns aren't, well, they're simplified versions of things. And obviously this is a movie costume and that in itself is not historically accurate all the time. But anyway, I know that the sleeves in this will not be how I will do that, so I'll just be ignoring that. I'm undecided on making the dressing gown at the moment. I love how it looks on this and in the pictures online. However, it doesn't really appear in the movie. So now I'm going to talk fabrics. So this I actually got a couple of years ago. I did tons of research into costumes in this movie. I always do that with movies I really like. However, if I were to buy this now, I wouldn't buy, obviously as you can see here, it's a synthetic fabric. It's not a natural fabric and I would prefer to use a natural fabric, and Victorian nightgowns were obviously made with natural fabrics and not a chiffon. However, it's got that beautiful sheer look that her costume has, and it's very ghostly, which is obviously very appropriate. And it's already pleated, which saves me a lot of time. I also have netting here, obviously, for the leg and mutton sleeves. So I have a ton of white cotton that I have just laying around that I need to use up, so that'll probably go to this. A great thing about patterns, if you don't usually use them, is that they do recommend fabrics for the garment, which is really useful sometimes. Now with the commercial pattern, this is where I'm getting a little bit lost, because this is the pattern that is supplied for the collar piece, but this is not long enough here and definitely not wide enough to do the smocking, which when I look at the reference on the pattern, it's just plain anyway, so it's not pleated, which means I have to open it up and splay it. I just need to add more length here because I do have a separate piece for the collar, but I want it all to be one piece, and I think I also want that for the base, so I don't want to use a collar piece, so this pattern is going away. So I am about to cut out my front of my dress, which I compare to the picture reference. It's not to the shoulders, which I have to keep reminding myself, it's to the base of this collar piece, which is why the top looks a bit funky. And I'm going to cut this out of the pleated fabric and the cotton. Okay, so let's talk about this collar piece, which is the scariest part of this costume because I've never done anything like this. But the pattern comes with obviously pre-made commercial patterns for this collar. However, mine needs to come out. I think that's just too small for how dramatic the collar is. Now, what I could do is trace around this onto pattern paper and sort of slice it a little bit, open and splay, and also add length onto it. But my next issue with this collar is figuring out basically how I want to do it. I saw the most accurate way of doing it, which was smocking. I saw a few of them use just rectangular strips of fabric, but I'm still confused as to how much, like mathematically, I would need and whether this pattern is correct or not, because if I place it on there, I don't think it works like this, and if I put it on the bias it still wouldn't work because I need the pleats going in this direction. So I'm figuring that out right now, but I'm going to be making it in this fabric with the cotton backing. Now my original plan was to cut it out of this and sort of gather, pleat, smock, this fabric, whatever, and have this just be as it is as a base, so that it's like a flat structured backing, or I could pleat, smock, gather, whatever, them both together, because it would make it more sturdy and it would be easier because I can't mark this fabric. Okay, so I've consulted with the internet and looked up at my reference images, and I think I'm definitely going to smock the collar. I'm still not sure on whether I want the whole thing around the neck to be one piece or whether I want to have some seams here. I'm not sure, but I've never done like anything like this collar before. So I think I'm going to smock the fabric and then just go from there. But I've just looked up at a bunch of different smocking tutorials and blogs, and they say to get large pleats, which has quite small here, to go with 2 centimetre marks. I'm trying to describe this as best I can, but I'm still learning myself. But I know for smocking you have to sort of mark the fabric every few centimetres, and that amount will vary on what kind of pleats you get at the end. So I think I might try a 1.5 space. Alright, so I've gone ahead and cut out a bunch of long rectangles out of my cotton. I'm hoping this is wide enough, because now I'm looking at it, I'm like, but I always think things look too small before I realise that I'm a very tiny human being, so it's probably fine. However, I don't think I have this length of the pleated fabric. I don't know if I have enough of this left to do all of this in like one strip. So whether I wanted seams in it or not, I'm going to have to put some in, even if they're like hidden seams. But I don't know how much fabric I needed to do this smocking. Like, I googled it and it was just like, yeah, it takes up a lot of fabric. But I don't know how much. I mean, I imagine it's going to be a lot, and this looks like a lot to me. I don't do math very well, so usually I'm just like, well, I'll cut more than I need and see where I go from there. Alright, so I've gotten the pleated fabric cut out, and now I have to figure out how I'm going to sort of lay this flat and attempt to hand sew it to smock it, and I'm not really sure. I'm a bit scared basically because its fabric moves constantly, like it will not stay still. Oh, did I mention by the way that it has been a nightmare to cut because it just constantly moves like everywhere. Okay, so I've come up with an idea that I think might work better, is if I machine sew on a very large wide stitch the top row and bottom row and leave it until I've hand sewn the rest to sort of gather. I think this will help me in the process of hand sewing, because as you can see this fabric just slips and sides everywhere no matter how much I try and pin it. So I think if I do this it'll give me a bit more control for when I do the hand sewing bits. Why am I out of breath talking about this? So much it's stressing me out. Stay still, fabric. Okay, so I've started marking the fabric for the smocking whilst leaving a little bit of seam allowance on the edge here with my Frixion pens, and I quickly realised that this is going to take me a long time, but there we go. Okay, so I have the first half marked, and it's now 10 PM, so I think I'm going to leave the hand sewing until tomorrow. Okay, so I've got the first little bit of this section here, and it's just how I want it to look, and on the back it looks something like that. It's a little tricky to get the hang of at the very start, but the longer the thread gets, the easier it is to pull, but you have to kind of pull every single thread together collectively, which is all of these that I've hand sewn as well as the 2 top gathering stitches, but it's looking nice. And the pleats look how I wanted them to look. They're not too big, they're not too deep. I can still sort of stretch them out a little bit along the bottom like I wanted to. But yeah, I'm really happy with it. Okay, so after about 5 hours of work, I now have a complete collar piece, and I'm going to try this on myself on my mannequin. But I know that hers has a sort of seam sort of around here to sort of keep this flat, if I can show you here. It's sort of flat here, but obviously this needs to go around my neck a bit more. So I think I need to add another gathering stitch maybe on machine to just pull that in a bit. So it's comfortable around my neck, but it doesn't restrict the movement of this part, if that makes any sense. I'm at quite a happy place with my collar now. It's looking good. I like the shape on it. I've tidied it up as much as I can, but this is what it kind of looks like off of my neck. I've also I bound off this edge to make the buttons a bit easier to sew on, and I've also added my loops over here. And yeah, the hardest part of this costume is done. Alright, so I have a lot of little buttons sewn on. I really like these buttons. I like the kind of off-white ivory colour. For my first attempt at ever doing anything like this, I don't think it looks too bad. I'm still sort of playing with the threads. I like how this side looks. I'm going to try and pull this a little bit more to get that same desired effect. But it seems to all be about playing with it, like by hand. But not bad. Now here is the sleeve pattern that is included in the commercial pattern, but it's just all wrong. I would draft the sleeve pattern myself. I kind of like this part down here. I know this is like way too big for my arm, absolutely, and it's also too long, and it is just the wrong shape. Okay, so I did something naughty and actually cut into the pattern itself, but I sort of altered it a little bit, read through the instructions, and actually this pattern makes a bit of sense if I just play around with it. So that's 2 sleeve puffs cut out, and as you can see the fabric just warps a lot because of this accordion effect, which is fine, you know, it is what it is, and you can only work with what the fabric allows. I know it'll look good, but if things aren't perfectly symmetrical, whatever. So the puffs have been backed with netting, and I'm going to iron them flat. They're sort of pulling and warping towards the sides, and then I'm going to, I think, baste around the edges. Okay, so that's done, and it should look something like this if you're following along and also doing it, which I think is unlikely, but on the off chance. Now don't worry about these being visible in the final dress, because once the seams are all sewn, you can just rip them out. But you should use a colour that doesn't match your fabric for the marking, because it helps you with seam allowance when sewing, so you don't need to mark your fabric. Now I'm moving on to my lower sleeve part, but this needs a backing mainly because the fabric moves quite a lot, as you can see here, and also I just think backing it is logical. And I'm going to tack around these edges and do some sewing on the sleeves, yay! Okay, so now we have both pieces of the sleeve basted to their backings, and now what's going to happen is this is going to be sewn together like a regular sleeve. I also don't have my overlocker working at the moment, so I'm going to have to sew everything, and if it's not lined, just leave it as it is until I can get my overlocker working and go back in at the end and overlock everything. So if you see any messy edges and you don't like the look of them, don't worry, they will be fixed at some point. Also, the bottom of the sleeve here will be turned under, slip stitched, or the edges will be bound off with bias binding, and then a lace trim will be added along the bottom. So yay! I'm gonna do that now. Okay, so let's gather these sleeve heads. So exciting, I love gathering. The sides will be sewn together, so I'm gathering from this point here to around here. I know there are a couple of ways that you could gather something, but if you want a method that is quite strong, because I'm sure you've all been through this, but when you gather it by machine and you start pulling that thread, sometimes it snaps, and it's the most frustrating thing in the world because you have to go and resew it all. If you use a buttonhole thread, which looks like this, if you place this along the line of your basting stitches and zigzag over the machine, by the end of it you pull it and it gathers it, and it gives it more strength. However, I think because this fabric is really delicate, it could probably withhold just being gathered by machine. I think I'll use a buttonhole thread up here, but probably just machine down here, like I've said. But if you don't have buttonhole thread, it's not the end of the world. It will probably still work just as fine, but I just hate gathering netted fabric. So I'm going to attempt to do this one-handed, but I have to really make sure that the needle and thread don't hit this thread, because then that will defeat the whole purpose of trying to gather it. But I believe this method, if you want to be a bit more in the know about it, is called couching down. And like I said, you trap the thread in the middle of a zigzag thread and hope it doesn't catch it. Let's see. There you go. Don't have the thread. And you get to the end and pull it, again one-handed, not the best, but it should gather. This is a really terrible demonstration. Okay, so job is done. As you can see, it's a little bit nicer looking than just rows of long threads, in my opinion. And you get to the end. I'm going to do a better job of this now because I feel like I need to properly demonstrate, otherwise I'm going to get dislikes. But you pull the thread, it's still terrible, and it gathers like this. It's much easier to gather as well, rather than it just relying all of the strength on one strip of thread. Again, if this was normal fabric and it didn't have the netting backing, it wouldn't matter, it would be easy to gather. But ta-da! I absolutely love gathered sleeves. It's going to be so cute, even though it's a gothic horror costume. Okay, so what I've done with my sleeve is I've sewn it together here. Voila! It looks like a mummy arm. And I've left the bottom edge from where the facing point was in the pattern, and I've actually turned both edges in. It didn't really work for me just turning one in because the wrist was a bit too loose. The pattern didn't really work with what they suggested you do. But this still needs to be hemmed down here. I'm going to slip stitch all of this down. I'm sorry this is such a crappy demonstration, but anyway, I'm going to try it on. It looks like toilet roll, as if I've just wrapped myself in that. Okay, so I think I might bring it down a little bit. Just looking at my reference picture above my desk here, I think I might bring it down to here. It's all got to be gathered up here, and that will come. Ooh, yes. And then this will have button loops and buttons on the edge here, so that will sort of button together, leaving me with this sort of open bit for my hand to move. Okay, so now I have quite a bit of hand sewing to do, and this will be the last thing I do before I call it a night because it's already like 9 PM. But I'm going to slip stitch these edges down here, and I'm going to press this up, slip stitch that down, and then add my little lace trim. And I have to cut and measure how much of this I need, and also sew on my little white buttons, which are so cute. If you aren't familiar with slip stitching, it's a stitch that basically disguises the fact that there is any stitching there, and it won't show on this other side because it will go into the cotton and it will sandwich between this layer here and this here. Okay, so I've attached the button loops and I sort of cut it a bit and stretched it out and used a hand sewn zigzag stitch, but I'm also measuring how long it takes me to do projects in like what I'm watching because I always have stuff on in the background. And I've written down in a notebook that my previous project, which was my Sylvie costume from Loki, took me one series of Vikings, and this I'm watching the Gossip Girl reboot, and so far it's been 2 episodes, so yeah. Okay, so I finished up the sleeves by sewing on all of these little tiny cute buttons. I think there are 19 on each sleeve, and they kind of do up until this point, and my hand has to fit and flare out through there. But I really like this little detail, and I think it's going to look really cute in pictures. Okay, so here's something super annoying. I had to order more fabric to do the back panel, which is this. And they've sent me like half of what I got last time, even though I ordered the same amount. I don't know why. I know it has to be sort of stretched out a bit before you use it, but like still that's almost half of what I need. And it took like 2 weeks to arrive, which is why I'm a little behind on its costume. And I mean, I could probably like put a seam down the back so I don't have to order like twice as much as this fabric, because obviously money. But I have to wait like another 2 weeks to finish this back panel here, and that's just really irritated me today. I wanted to get this dress done, and all I need to do is sew up the actual dress itself, but yeah. Okay, it's just a mess of fabric bits everywhere, but I'm about to sew my centre front and centre back of my dress. But what I've just planned to do is, once I sew these side seams together, I'm going to sew these little shoulder seams together and deepen the armholes. I don't think I'm meant to do that with the pattern, but I'm going to do it, and then slip stitch the collar piece on top of it. Yeah, I think that's gonna work. I'm not very good at describing it, but I'm just gonna show you as I go. Okay, so a sea of fabric in this dress, but I'm now gathering the top and back together. I've just done the back, and now I'm just doing the top. I'm decided I'm just gonna pleat the whole way around and just see what happens. I'm gonna pin it to the collar, then try it on and go from there. Okay, so I've gone and tried the base dress on, but this is the shape of it. It looks like, oh sorry about the lighting, it looks like a Victorian nightgown, as it should. I was like, wait, I look like a Victorian ghost, and then I was like, oh wait, that's the point. But that's what this looks like. I'm gonna try one of the sleeves on. Sorry I'm not showing my face on camera, I just don't want to at the moment. They will look something like that, which is so cool. I love that. Alright, so we've got our sleeves set in, and I didn't really feel much of it because I've already gathered the sleeves and all I was doing was sewing it into the armhole. Not that exciting, but I love how it looks. I just have this pool of fabric on the floor that I need to hem, but it's going to be super simple to hem, so I probably won't include it in this video. But now I'm going to put the collar on, pin it in place, and stitch that on by hand in certain places. I think I'm going to anchor it instead of doing a big full stitch line. Alright, so I've gone ahead and pinned the collar on in places that I want to anchor it down, and I'm basically anchoring it along the neckline in certain spots. Oh, I should also add before I go and finish it up that I'm going to be wearing this to MCM London in October because it's very Halloween-y, it's a ghost, and I feel like it's very fitting. I'm so glad she's done though, and if I don't include a bit at the end where I put this on and show the full costume, I will end the video here, and you can find me on Tinkerbri Costumes to see any finished pictures. And thank you for watching. If you've stayed till the end, I hope it was sort of exciting to watch. I'm really proud of it. I like how it looks. I can't wait to wear it to a con. Bye!